Thank you for joining us. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on our Google Hangout here. Andres Almeida, your Transcription Center Coordinator, and I'm so happy that you're joining us live here from the National Museum of American History here in Washington, D.C. I'm happy to be joined by Joe Hersey to over here on this side. Joe Hersey is reference archivist.
How do you do there?
Yeah, and Justine Thomas, who was an intern before as a reference intern, and now she's back as a processing intern here in the museum.
Hi.
Yeah. We're going to talk today about these diaries about three different people who lived around the same time. Their lives kind of overlapped, but they lived vastly different lives. One, a farming woman from Ohio. Two, a inventor out of New York City who lived in New York City. Yep. And the third was a white collar engineer who worked for General Electric up in upstate New York and other parts of the country. So, Joe, what can we learn from these diaries? How are their American story kind of tied together?
Well, thing about it is that the story here is what happens is that you have the American inventor who lives in New York City, and you have the farmer's wife, and you have also the engineer, and they overlap heavily during the Depression era and also into World War II. And so they provide a really good, when you compile them all together, they provide a really good insight. Separately, they're great stories and individual, but when you put them together and you compare similar experiences, it gives you a really good perception of what the average Americans were thinking, or what America as a whole was thinking. And so individually they're great, but together they add so much more and enrich American history so much more.
Yeah, they're not just these household names that people know. They're so to speak, average people who have their own particular experience with whatever's unfolding around them.
Yeah. And like one of them, we don't know, most people don't know his name, but he's the guy who invented plastic. It's Baekeland, or he invented, some people will know his product called Bakelite. And he lived in New York City. And then the inventor, or the engineer, he worked for General Electric when it was first starting and really growing in the 1920s and 1930s. And then you have just a farmer's wife in Ohio.
Wow. So let's talk about what these transcriptions kind of reveal through the eyes of the witnesses. If we can do a little screen sharing here, we'll get to exactly what. Well, why don't we just read through it first? What do these transcriptions reveal through the eyes of the witnesses? For example, we have an entry here from Leo Baekeland that you were talking about.
Yeah, that one's is Leo Baekeland there, and he explains that he's got a telegram from an office telling him that the cyanide company desired to know whether Dr. Ripper's a Jew. Baekeland had part of his plastic corporation, Bakelite Corporation, had a German division in Berlin, and so it was in the early years of when World War II, or when the oppression of the Jews was happening in Germany. His business partners, many of them were actually of Jewish descent, and so the German competitors were constantly inquiring which ones were Jews, so that they could go ahead and whatever business practices they were wanting to use, but they were using the Nazi what was going on with Nazi Germany at the time, just to knock off business competition.
Yeah. So that's here one of his journal entries here, as you can see the page, and he was a chemist who invented this plastic.
Yes, plastic. Yes. He certainly did. In 1907, he developed the first commercial usable plastic. And so nowadays, during the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, many products like radio or TV cases, the telephone cases that you see on the old rotary telephones were Bakelite, as well as jewelry, kitchen appliance, and tools. So,
Well, what about this journal from, his name was Foreman Creighton? What do we know about him?
He was an engineer with General Electric, and also in 1942 he went on and worked on the war board for a year. And so his interest is very much within what's going on with his work. You saw that when the buildup for World War II, his company started getting many calls, and they started diverting a lot of operations towards the war effort. And so he's seeing that the war is being declared in Europe, and he also was really interested in the development of the war in Europe. And so he started collecting some entries, how he collected Time and Life magazines, because he wanted to have a historical collection of what was occurring over there. And so you see him on a national level, while Baekeland was concerned internationally was going on with a buildup of war. He's concerned nationally what's going to affect him, the company he worked for.
Mm-hmm. So what's this entry here?
The entry, explains that this is going to go down as a fateful day in human history. That England and France and Britain's dominions declared war on Germany, and he has numerous entries prior to. He didn't think early in the days that this would actually happen. Then he started, right here in this entry here, he said America will do its best to stay out of this, but sometime think we will cannot any more than we could before. So just like World War I, we tried to stay out of the war, then we ended up in it, and that's what his fear is, that this is going to happen again.
So we do want to remind people that these projects are actually on our transcription center website, transcription.si.edu. Some of them are complete and some of them are still available, especially the Anna Bartlett Myers ones. And volunteers have actually been going pretty quickly through these, right? Yeah.
And we also, Anna Bartlett, we're getting what was online was only half. We're going to add the next half on because she started Diaries 1931, this 1967. And so we're adding the 1948 through 67 here probably this week sometime. And then same as the Foreman Creighton, we're adding another load of his diaries here. And we've been adding his on a box at a time. And so his will go on from right around 41 through 1944.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and we do have an excerpt from Miss Anna Mae Bartlett, which is this one here. So, what do we glean from this entry here that has been digitized, and volunteers have actually already transcribed? I like this entry.
Yeah, exactly. And Anna Mae Bartlett, her entries were really common like that. Unlike each one wrote for a different purpose. Baekeland was writing because he wanted to digitize, or he wanted to document his work in the invention of plastic and everything that went along with it, plus day-to-day activities. Former Creighton wanted to document his life and history as it happened around him, but he wanted, and so his whole diaries covered to span his entire life. She was maintaining her diaries as like a business account, trying to track the business of our farm, but also she has on here explaining, about Japan invaded Hawaii, and then she jumps right straight to another beautiful day. Mm-hmm. And while hers seem very sporadic or broken up, it's because the fact is the other two would write at the end of the day their diaries and write a description of what happened throughout the day. While she would stop, she'd write a quick line in what happened today, whether they sold a cow or they bought chickens or they sold eggs. And then the next line could be, oh, Japan just invaded Hawaii. And the next line would be, we just hired a new farm hand. And so she's writing throughout the day and stopping throughout the day, writing entries in.
Yeah. So we had a volunteer who emailed us and sent us links to her blog post about how she was kind of gleaning things about Anna Mae Bartlett Myers' diaries. Not only is this person seeing, all right, this is how this person lived, but she's also learning how it's not just, as she said in the blog post, it's not just, housekeeping isn't just women's work. Like it's, and those kind of things are fascinating when people discover, or not just discover, but take note when somebody writes that in the 40s and 50s, like, man, I've been busting my butt.
Yeah. And, the thing about it is that it's a great view on how they made it through the Depression, because she has many entries in there about how the hard times was through the 30s and 40s and what they did to make ends meet. They got rid of cows and went to chickens, which is cheaper and easier to maintain during one of the leaner times. She also talks about, we have sat down and made another dress today, and she makes lots of dresses throughout that. Yeah. Or they went and they bought 90 pounds of cabbage. And then the next day's entries is me and my mom sat down and we made 60 gallons of sauerkraut. So, I mean, it's just incredible things that we'd never think of in this current time, sitting down and I'm going to buy 90 pounds of cabbage. I mean, who does that? But, exactly, yeah. But this is a great view on that time period and how the average American, what they were living, what life was like.
So we have these diaries, and how do you acquire them actually? How do people come to you and you decide, well, maybe we want this project or this collection to be accessible to the public? How do you decide what you want to collect?
It goes through a board, but moreover, we look at the, is this a benefit to the wider telling the American story? If she just kept, someone brought in diaries and they just talk about what happened locally in that town and only that town, we'd probably let them know, it'd be best served if you would donate to either a local historical society or state historical society. Keep it close to where the material where people want to look for it. But with Animated Bar Lips, she tells a lot about what's going on in the area around her in the country, but also having her diaries for us to have a good sample of what the average American was doing. And so these diaries, we'll collect them a lot of times where the families say, hey, we're looking for a home for these here, and we think they're great. They're valued American history, and are you interested? And then we'll review it, and if we find that this is what we really want, and if it does add value, then yes, we'll go ahead and we'll take it. Leo Baekeland, the inventor of plastic, his diaries came in as part of his collection. So we're collecting, an inventor's collection that invented plastic, which is very worldwide known and very important to American history, invention and technology. So we took it in, and his diaries are part of a greater collection. And then former Creighton, with the Creighton Diaries, he documented his whole life, and we just thought that was very interesting, all the stories he had. And he's talked about his work with GE when starting, and also then work for the War Board, and it tells, again, enriches American experience. So that's why we take things in.
Yeah, that's important. So what we have these collections, and then what is it really? What's the feasibility of digitizing? Like how should you digitize it, and what are the benefits and risks of doing it? And Justine, to jump in as well, because you've done it as well.
Go ahead.
Feel free.
Yeah. So one of the benefits of digitization, is being able to replicate, I guess, coming into the reading room on your home computer on like a personal scale. So you're able to have the same experience of going through the different documents and taking your personal notes and research, but wherever you want to be in the world, which is something that is an awesome part of the digitization. It also can take a lot of time and a lot of resources, and some of the collections that are processed can take, I don't even know how long, but it definitely is worthwhile once it is completed, and it helps, I don't know, to, I guess, transcribe in a way what those stories are, but on a broader scale, so people can look at them anywhere in the world.
So, I mean, you think of a collection, you think, oh, someone's diary, but actually you have thousands upon thousands of pages, so multiple volumes of a diary. Is there some sort of risk in maybe, I don't know, damaging, or I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it's just more about just being as cautious as you can, but I think the benefit outweighs the risk of potentially damaging something, because I mean, you're just going to make it into, I don't like harming it, wouldn't necessarily be scanning it by any means, because through scanning it, you're just going to be able to view it, and wouldn't cause any physical harm to the object. Definitely that benefit is really great of digitization. So.
And the thing about it is that paper, regardless, most of our material is paper that we have in archives, and regardless, paper is degrading no matter what. And so if we capture it now, we have what it looks like now in its current condition. We have that purposely or permanently preserved forever. And so, and the other thing too is that we hold the material so that's available for researchers, but some of it is really delicate, and we let researchers handle it. It's just going to increase degradation to it. So by this way, if it's something so delicate that it's just going to be too damaging for someone to handle it, we can handle it one time, very easy. Put it on the scanner, scan it, and its digital image is permanently preserved of that. And then it's also available online too, so that our researcher can come in, they can look at just as high quality of an image of what the real document looks like without handling the original one.
So those records appear on, you create a record online on the Smithsonian collection search, and then so these images finally become accessible. But that's not the final step, right? Perhaps you want someone to have, or you want to have people transcribe these images, transcribe what they see, these journals, so then they can actually become searchable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, the whole process is a lot bigger than it sounds. We're just not put on a scanner and all of a sudden it's automatically uploaded and available on the internet. I'll go ahead and I'll review. We'll figure out. We'll discuss. and we'll figure out what's the easiest or what's a feasible project we can put together. Then I'll work with people like Justine, who are interns that we have with us, and through their hard lifting, they'll sit there and then we'll work together and they'll scan this documents. Once the documents are scanned, I'll take and I'll review that collection of material for accuracy, and then also we'll put the metadata in there, the background information. And then we have another person that goes to Kay Peterson, who works with us, and she's one who loads it up into her data access management systems. And from there, Allison, another staff member, will turn around and they attach it to the finding aids, which creates a link so that I can go ahead and I can take that link and put it in the transcription center for transcribing.
So that page, we can actually see it here wherever we go through collection search. That page can be linked to, so we're here now, and if somebody wants to type, say, Leo Baekeland.
Yeah.
Yep.
So let's try it. There's a different spelling, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Wait, there it is.
There you go.
We'll do a little search, and we can even filter a bit by type if we want to have archival materials, diaries, photographs even. And this is one of the diaries here.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so these are diaries right here that we went ahead and we've scanned these here. We did is about 7,000 pages and 65 volumes of his diaries, and they span
65.
Yeah, 1907 and 1942.
Wow.
And so, yeah, but once we capture these here, then, you know, this material that once you had to visit the archives to see is now available to anybody with internet connection.
Right.
And that's one of the great things with Transcription Center.
So people can go to the transcription center here, go to the project page. We have all the diaries from all the name Myers here.
Yep, those are current ones that people are working
Current
on.
ones, yeah. And the great thing about that is, if you go to the project description, you go to catalog record, that'll take you to the collections page, and you can see if somebody came here first, they'll be able to see that this is being transcribed. What if there were a complete page? Let's go through a complete page here.
And the other thing too is once the diaries are completed, the transcription is done, is they become word searchable, and we can attach that link to the finding aid. So now a researcher looking at the finding aid does not only see what we have in the collection, which a finding aid is an itemized list of what's in each collection.
Sure.
And so they can actually see that digital image there, they click on it, and then they can actually see all the scans plus the transcription is word searchable. So it also significantly reduces the researcher's time in working with this handwritten material.
I can jump around a bit. I like that volunteers leave notes at the bottom.
Yeah.
Here. The correct spelling of the actor's name is Paul Henreid, but it appears to be spelled Henreid in a different way. What's entry? Oh, okay. The E and the I were reversed. Yeah, that's an interesting component that we get from volunteers. So a page gets downloaded, a page gets completely transcribed, and a researcher can come back and compare the notes and actually read it. So if you know, nowadays kids aren't really learning handwriting as much.
Yep.
So
Right.
it's important for the transcriptions to exist.
Right, and
Yeah.
especially when the handwriting is poor, it gives the benefit of being able to have the word searchable document for even more intense research. So.
Yeah. Good. So we digitize the material, but how? Does it go through a machine? Is it just simply a camera? How do you digitize these materials?
So there are a few different scanners here at the Archive Center that can be used for books specifically. Other scanners that also are used for photographs as well. But yeah, typically through the scanner itself, and it takes a few seconds, but then there's entering in the metadata as you're going through it as well, which also can take a little bit of time. Yeah, so it definitely is a process. Yeah.
Is that a current intern or a former?
Yes, it is. That's current intern there.
And
she's using the book scanner right there behind her. The book scanner works similar to basically taking an overhead photograph. You'll see that arm sticking up there and light shining down the piece of paper right there. And so it takes a picture of that. And on the left is a flatbed scanner, which will do, it's better for colored images and stuff like that, while the book scanner is good for typed text or handwritten text. And then we also have a large format scanner that will do maps, posters, and architectural drawings, and it's up to 4 feet wide by 8-10 feet long.
So I know every project varies, but for example, show us like maybe a collection that's tattered up. How long you transcribed the Charles Francis Hall collection, which volunteers had. Well, the projects that are available now, that were available, they finished up, thankfully. Very.
Yeah.
So Jill's gonna pull up this collection that Justine so bravely had digitized a big portion of it.
It's hard to show it, but myself and another intern 2 years ago helped to digitize the Charles Francis Hall collection, which was 12 boxes, I believe.
Yes, 12 boxes. The collection is.
So
we can bring it a little closer.
Yeah, I'm trying to see the light here. So.
This is definitely not the cleanest of documents, but.
And then you see that they can go small pieces of paper to just bits and squares, and if you can't see,
yeah. I wonder.
Yeah, so each of these little documents
has a note on it.
They're on the book scanner. Every single one of these little pieces was scanned. So.
Wow.
Definitely.
I mean, every single one.
So process.
Even this piece, which
yes,
you wouldn't think, but look, there's actually writing on the back or in the front. And then volunteers actually transcribe this stuff. Yeah, but it's not a single effort. It's that's why it's
no, it's a large team effort for us to see. And plus, with the transcription center personnel, yourself there, there's probably 7-8 people involved in the process for each item that goes on.
Sure. You guys did that.
Yeah, this one's a little bit easier to read too.
Yeah, it's a little easier.
And Jesse, another intern, they did this here, the Charles Francis Hall collection, all these rough individual piece of paper, and it's about 12,000 pages, and it took them about 4 months of work.
Yeah.
And this is working full time, coming in here every day. I mean, this was a very intense work here, very meticulous. And the problem is also what slows you down is that when you're using the scanning equipment, you've got to resize it for the size of each individual piece of paper. And when you got a collection like this, that every piece has a different size, you're going through and you have to change the size, the resolution,
right,
and all of that, the mechanical portion, just to take that one image.
Yeah.
Then you go through, you pick up another one, you go through the same effort.
Right, like a small piece of paper like this size would have to be cropped compared to scanning one that was a larger size document. So even that process, you can't just scan it and put it back in the folder. Each piece takes a long time.
It's quite a while.
Yeah.
Actually, I thought to pull up one of the Hall projects in a bit, but why was the Charles Francis Hall project something that felt was important to not only digitize but transcribe? Who was Charles Francis Hall?
Charles Francis Hall was an American explorer, and he was during 1850s. I'm sorry, 1850s. He was a printer and editor of small Cincinnati paper, and he just really started doing all these stories on British exploration. And then the Sir John Franklin expedition became lost in the late 1840s, and he's writing about that and became very enthralled and excited about these stories. And he wanted, while the British were launching efforts to find the lost Franklin expedition, he thought, I can do it too.
Yeah.
And while he was actually probably the most unskilled person to make this attempt, he became the most successful person ever to live in the Arctic, the first American ever to go out there and live amongst the Inuit. And while the British and everything were struggling on how to survive up there, they kept themselves separate and they lived by Western ideas and methods. He thought you could survive a lot better, a lot longer by living as the Inuits did, living the Eskimo, living amongst them in their igloos, eating their foods, wearing their clothes, and he did it for almost 7 years.
Wow.
And so, which is just an incredible amount of time. But while he was doing that, what's valuable about the diaries is that he's documenting first person to ever translate their language. He was documenting their culture, their religion, their beliefs, their traditions. The first person to really capture that, and it's all captured in his diaries. As he learns a new word, he writes it down in his diary. So you see many of the Inuit words written down, and then he put a translation what it is. And this was the first, and he did it all on his own. His first expedition, he just had his ship take him up there and dropped him off, and he just found his way. I mean, literally. And so, I mean, I just don't get, whatever would have compelled him to believe that he could do this, but he did it, and he did it amazingly.
So if you're a journalist and you feel hopeless, like there's
exactly.
Don't feel like that's the last stop. Gosh, actually, I pulled up one of the pages that.
That's what he had these sketches, and as you can see, he was not the best artist. But they're just, I mean, they're great though, because while he was up there, wasn't that well at it, he did learn how to survey, and he surveyed, improved, and he corrected a lot of maps of the Arctic. And so, which saved a lot of countless lives before, because people were believing that a lot of waterways were straight through and they just sailed through, when actually they were dead ends. And so he did a lot of that work too.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say some of my favorite drawings are the seal images. It's interesting to see his depictions of the people and their lives amongst his writings. But one of my favorite parts of this collection definitely were the sketches and drawings. Really cool.
And Fallen Pierce have transcribed a lot of this, and are there more in the pipeline of this?
Oh yeah. We've only I've got maybe a sixth of the Hall material, but because of the way it is, that they're reviewing it and getting it out there, but make sure everything's captured and is captured correctly on the metadata is very time consuming on this collection. It's not as easy as the Bartlett Diaries. Because the Bartlett, you put the metadata in for one diary. This here you have to do for every individual page.
Wow. We have it's funny, we have another intern here. He's just off camera and he's shaking his head in disbelief. Like, what? You know what you got yourself into?
This is what you got into?
Yeah. No, but the stories themselves are kind of fascinating.
But the value is, once it's digitized and it's been transcribed, the value is just incredible. We've already got people who are using this in the field in the Arctic. Now they got internet, if they got an internet connection, and to review this stuff, because they're still doing more searches for lost expeditions up there.
I mean, I'm kind of still thinking about becoming. I study journalism, study communications, and just saying, you know what, I'm going to go explore. Where's my life? That's quite a guy. Do we know what happened to him?
Yes, he'd made 3 expeditions up there, and by his 3rd expedition was a sponsored expedition. It just wasn't set up very well. Once he got up there, he'd actually made the farthest northern point of any Western and any known man, and he documented it up there. But when he came back to ship, he drank coffee that was possibly poisoned by a crew member, and he died.
Right.
Wow.
And it looks like more than likely his crew, someone on his crew did murder him.
Right. In one of the last entries that were scanned, I think he wrote, I'm worried something with my crew was going on, something to that effect. But there were definitely some anxieties about what was going to happen to him. And that was how it ended.
That's how it ended.
Yeah. And those papers, most of those papers have been lost. So on the 3rd voyage, we only have one existing that we know of from the 3rd voyage.
Do you know of any other papers from any other crew members?
The Navy took testimony during that time period, during the 1870s, from all the crew were required on 3rd voyage to maintain a diary. They were literate. And so the Navy kept those, and they did do an investigation, and they held the diaries.
Wow.
So, and matter of fact, the Navy actually had this collection too, and they turned over this collection, because this collection comprises mostly of the 1st and 2nd expeditions. And after they conducted their investigation, also wrote a book on Hall's 1st or 2nd expedition. They released these papers to us, and so we've had it since the 1870s.
1870s, yeah. And so we have this. Yeah, this is an American. It's an American explorer. I kind of want to go back to Foreman Creighton. I don't think we talked too much about him, but what have you learned about his life? His through his journals. That it's more of like a memoir.
Yeah, it's well, the first portion, he started writing, actually wanted to write his life in diary. So by 25 years old, he realized he wanted to capture this here. So he wrote the first from birth up till about 25 in memoir form, through letters, photos, and everything, like various material he'd get a hold of, plus memory, and he wrote it. And then after that, he kept a continual diary going of his life. And he talked about he has like a set of diaries just set off on his boating years, because him and his friends and his wife were all involved in, those little small yachts, and that's what they like, part of the yacht club. He was came from a very affluent family. And so this gives you the viewpoint of somebody who is, very affluent, very well off, very well educated. And so he talks about life from that point of view, from that vantage point. He went to work for GE, then he went for, during 1942, took a year off from that and worked for the War Board. And then he went back to GE, and then later on in life he retired. And then his later life, as he retired, his diaries cover all his travels. Him and his wife traveled a lot. It looks like they spent probably every 6 months in Hawaii, and then various travels throughout Europe and Asia. And so he documents that quite heavily. Plus, he's very detailed. He doesn't hold anything back on his opinions. He writes about what's going on American politics, world politics, history, but also he talks about day-to-day what's going on with his medical issues. And so some of them are a little too much information from my personal preference, but he does this. He doesn't hold back. And so it's a great view into 1960s and 70s as people are aging.
Awesome.
What are the treatments they're doing for different types of things he was dealing with? And so,
oh wow, so yeah,
and so it has that. So it's very interesting.
So possibly when you overshare on Facebook, it could be useful.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Never know.
And he does overshare. So
nice. All right. So I did pull up a little excerpt, some pieces of this project that people have transcribed. This page is done, and it's a little reminder here that not everything that we have on Transcription Center is all handwritten. Some people prefer not to transcribe handwritten stuff, and they'll go to the review process, which is actually, I think, the most important process, the most important step, because once a page gets marked complete and reviewed, then finally that becomes indexed, meaning it becomes searchable. The project reaches its goal of what it wants to be searchable. So this page here is typed, which I imagine contributed a bit to the speed of this project, kind of.
And his material, he handwrites some and he types
Yeah.
some. So it's a mixture, and it's all on this type of paper right here. And so I imagine he probably kept diaries, and later he transcribed them over, whether handwritten or typed, because it's all very uniform paper. So trying to find it through an 83-year life, the same paper, thing he probably did not do. But
sure. Yeah, for example, this page here is actually handwritten.
Yeah.
By him or someone else?
It's him. It's his handwriting. Yeah. And he, even towards the end of his diaries, he's writing, he's looking at having all his life published. And so he even makes excerpts in there saying, I don't know if I should give this up, or just it's too much work maintaining this lifetime diary. And then later on he comes back and he writes, no, I want to keep going. I've gotten this far. I want to continue doing it. And so he does doubt himself whether or not he wants to keep doing these diaries, documenting his whole life.
Well,
so
I know that we also have this project up here from Franklin Kameni. Do you know much about how you acquired this collection for the LGBT collection?
We just received these recently, actually, probably about 2 months ago, and it's part of our LGBT collection. I do not know a lot about Frank Kameni, and it was a friend of his who donated these to us. And so there are 2 diaries, and what they're doing, he was going around in the 1950s, and he was keeping note through his travels of gay-friendly establishments, whether it be restaurants, bars, nightclubs, and stuff like that. And they're also coded. And so some of the codes we're starting to figure out. We're getting an idea what they think they mean. Some of the codes we don't know. And so we're not exactly sure yet. So this is hopefully the transcription will make it clearer, the discovery of what all this means here.
Yeah, I know Franklin Kameni was, I believe the first person to bring a case to the Supreme Court for having been fired just for being openly LGBT. And so I know his collection happens to be a kind of a big contribution to LGBT history. So volunteers are transcribing this, and they have. What's interesting is every now and then we receive an email saying, "Oh, I think I know why or what this means. The R, the L might mean." There's a group in St. Louis who was doing a mapping St. Louis,
yes,
mapping queer St. Louis, yeah. And so they said that the transcriptions that volunteers are doing, we're using them to do a historical map, a map of of establishments that once existed, and that's crucial to, it's an American history story as well. So it's another reminder that these transcriptions are being used and being made usable to organizations, not just individual researchers, but institutions and organizations. Yeah.
Yeah, but once you, like for the committee there, once you get them here and you figure out the establishments, they'll add to a larger or maybe even a local history. Hey, we, by these diaries for the LGBT community, this is places that we could go. There's no problem, or these places that we're maybe not gonna go, but it opens up a history for them for research and stuff like that. So
whether police raids, stuff like that. Yeah, it's interesting. So let's see. Yeah, so like we said, these transcribed projects, they present varying viewpoints of the same historical context or same historical event. Have you come across anything that's, I don't know, what's something that's most memorable or jarring? Anything? Some history isn't always, or things that you read isn't always like appealing or happy-go-lucky.
No. Well, for me recently is going back through the Baekeland, and and finding that for the 1930s, all this he talks about, we didn't really have any knowledge that he had a German branch of his company, and that he talks continuously about his employees being oppressed for being Jewish. That's certainly new to us. I mean, it's not like really exciting, but it adds a lot to the history of that. And that the viewpoints, you're seeing that not only did that happen here, but people like Baekeland were discovering it. And they were contacting by telegram from Germany saying, hey, out your Jewish employees, identify them for us. So this was not just something happening in Germany, but they're contacting people in the United States to turn in people. And he talks about his business partners, how they're getting pressure, and how some are made enemies of the German state, and how they're also getting frantic. He talked to, I saw one of my employees, and he's very worn out and tired and haggard by all what he's experiencing. And so while this is a very dark portion of history, it's still a great tool now for studying and getting a really good idea. The other thing he talks about was really surprising, was that Baekeland was a American immigrant from Belgium, so he knew Europe. And he talks about going in 1931-32 back to Berlin, this shortly after Hitler took over, and he talks about the changes he sees in Berlin, and how that now everybody's wearing some type of uniform, everybody's wearing some type of German Iron Cross. He's seeing swastikas. He calls swastikas. He's seeing the flags around. He said, this was not Germany I knew before. He goes, this is very different. And so he describes that. You got to first, not just read a history, but you got a first person's view who was there before, who's now documenting the changes that happens without knowing what the future is going to hold. And so it's very good to see this type of history happening, and from that viewpoint, instead of reading and already knowing what happened. So,
and he wrote about that in his
diaries. Yes, they're in the diaries.
Digitized now.
Wow. Exactly. And so if you, when you do now word searches, I put Berlin and Hitler, and all this material comes up, or search Jew, and all these pages will come up instantly. And it's just a great read and a great study of it.
The volunteers do so much, and they often breeze through it. Has that particular page, or those pages have been transcribed?
Baekeland's was 100% transcribed. And so now it's the whole thing's usable for everybody, because his handwriting's not that great. So now, instead of spending months scouring over diaries, you can do your searches and everything in just a few minutes, a few hours. So it's great work for the volunteers we have. That's invaluable.
Yeah, that is invaluable. In case you're unfamiliar with our website as well, here we have a search feature where, as Joe said, if you want to type something specifically, maybe type with quotes. Let's see if we can do Berlin.
Actually, let's put both of them in quotes. Berlin and Hitler, and it'll pop up.
Or separately?
Yeah, separately, I'm sorry.
And you can even sort by the museum unit, gallery, library, museum here. So This shows up quite a bit.
There you go. Those are all the Baekeland pages.
These are all the Baekeland pages, which is integrated with the collection search.
Yep.
So you can click on that there, and it'll take you to this very page.
And also, if you click over on the far left of the page itself, it just brings you up that page only.
Yes.
Which is just great, and it has that and the transcription. And so it's just amazing to see that, this history now is right there and available very easily. And again, before, if you want to look at this material, you'd have to come all the way to here. The transportation cost, maybe you can do it. You can't. For most people, that's difficult. But now, if you're anybody has internet access, can access these valuable documents.
Amazing. So you've heard from yourself that researchers have reported back that they have used the transcribed material.
Oh yeah,
right.
Absolutely. We did one ledger as a Civil War post Civil War ledger, and it's just monstrous. And so one person research came in, they're wanting to find tea versus coffee sales. Now going through this ledger that was 24 inches by 18 inches wide when closed, they open it up and it's 500 plus pages, and trying to find those entries. And so I showed them, they did a word search, and they found every tea and coffee entry, which was only about 6 or 7 entries in a few minutes. And so their research was done. And so if not, they could have scoured on there for months trying to find these entries, handwritten entries. And so this is the value of having this material transcribed. It's incredible.
I'm seeing our Twitter feed. Siobhan in New Zealand says we're watching this live. And Carrie, actually, so Carrie, I might butcher her name actually. Carrie Gallis-Roos, she's following us on Twitter at ArchAdventures. The Charles Francis Hall collection, good times. Can you explain the provenance of how the Bartlett Myers diaries were donated to the Smithsonian? But they came through
it's just a family donation.
Yeah,
it's a family donation. Family approached us, and they thought these are valuable to American history, which we get a lot of that. And so they wanted to submit it to us. We reviewed them, and we determined that these would be a very valuable collection for us. And that's how we got them.
Good. All right. If you have any questions, please do use the hashtag if you're on Twitter, American Diaries, or email us at transcribe@si.edu. We are on Twitter as transcribe.si, and also the American History Museum, AM History Museum. But I will let to know. I don't know if you have any questions right off camera. Yeah. So this collection itself is in pieces, but how many more volumes do you have of the other collection here?
The collection. Right now, the other one we got right there is the Leo Baekeland. It's already done.
Okay.
The Creighton, I'm getting ready to add in. What we've already put online and moved online is the first 2 boxes. It's a 13-box collection. So what they're seeing is just a small portion. His collection goes all the way to 1983, his diaries. And so I've got all the way to 1940 online and almost finished the last. I think there's 1 volume left. And this week, sometime probably later this week, I'll add another box up there, which is going to take it to 1944. And so he has so many pages, so it takes a little bit of time to review them and get them up there. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then Anna Mae Bartlett, we're adding her 48 to 67, which would be the last half of her diaries. And then we're adding an ivory trader from 1907 to 1911 and kept his diaries on the African ivory trade, and he was a trader over there. And so we're going to put that material on.
Yes. You made me think when you're talking about the diaries. Someone on Twitter said, all right, so we have Anna Mae Bartlett Myers' journal diary when she said, I baked a fruitcake on December 7th, 1941, when Pearl Harbor was bombed. A follower said, I wonder what her friend Edna thought about the fruitcake. Like, we would love to see the diaries from the people that these people knew. Right. Did Edna throw it out? Like, did Edna enjoy it?
Oh, no. And so far, I've seen several farmers' diaries collections, and it seems like it's always the wife who maintains them. And every one we've gotten so far, and it's the wife who maintains them. They maintain them to keep a daily account, a business account. But they also make little entries here and there that are, that are non-accounting, non-financial. Hey, I baked a cake. We bought some other, vegetables here. We're getting ready to can some, cabbage.
Yep.
And so, yes, so they add a lot to it. And then I've had something very bland. They'll just keep straight accounting, and that is it, nothing more. And that's also great for research, because anybody want to do research in finance or economics of that period of what was going on. That's what the Civil War ledgers. People would use them for economic research. Okay, what was post-Civil War, which they knew that a lot of places suffered financially. Okay, what were the prices like? And so there's a lot of value in that. But we do get farmers' diaries, and they're great insight on just what the average person was doing, what life was like.
Oh.
So,
Justine, we ran into each other, or I met you when we had the archives fair here in the museum in October 2017. Yeah, it's already 2018.
Yeah,
2017. And I explained to you, do you know about the transcription center? We had a table out there, and Justine goes, oh yeah, and you had your mouth closed because you couldn't believe that the Charles Francis Hall diaries were being transcribed or already had been transcribed.
Yeah, it was hard to see the longevity of the project, because when I was in the room digitizing these years ago, it's hard to imagine that so many are available online and for people to look at. So I guess visualizing that journey that the documents have taken, and that was pretty awe-inspiring to me. And it definitely was. It's just crazy to see that people are using them and actually learning something from being able to go online and access it wherever they are in the world, which is really awesome.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, I do want to send mention this reminder that anybody can transcribe, even if it's just one line. It's a big contribution, because then somebody else can come in and finish the work or contribute as much as they can. You don't have to create an account on the Transcription Center, but if you do, then you'll be able to do the review process where you see what transcriptions are, what's accurate, what could be changed. That often happens. So we'll often get emails asking people to reopen a page or offer a correction or offer resources. So thank you all for that. But touching back on reopening a page, Joe, is it important are you looking for precision? Are you looking for good enough? Like, what's the line here on transcriptions?
Yeah, and that was the question when we first started, because I began with when the Transcription Center started. Input, and that was Hall was the first, Leo Baekeland was the first material we put in. And so there's a lot of doubt whether or not the volunteers could transcribe at the quality we needed. And so far their quality has surpassed it. And we're looking for, yes, get as close and as accurate as you can. But the transcription also allows for correction, edits, and other people are going to come behind you and review it also. So don't feel intimidated.
Yeah.
And having people from all walks of life also helps too, because while somebody might not know the exact spelling of some small town in New York, someone from that area or been there, they jump in, they say, okay, no, it's actually spelled this way, and they can help with that process. So this has been great. But yeah, we're looking for people to be as accurate as possible, but we're not looking for exact perfection, because the transcript, knowing the context material and having that word searchable text is incredibly valuable to us.
Yeah, and then the benefit is that you also, if a researcher comes in or accesses online, you do have the image of the original with the transcription, so they can compare that way.
Exactly. So yeah, if there's any questions, and if you also have questions, I've had people, they didn't know what a word was, and they'll type in their question mark after it. And that is fine too, because that also allows the reviewer or researcher later to go, hey, they weren't sure, but let me look at the original scan, and they compare it, and they can make their own general guess at what they thought it is. So that helps too.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly valuable.
That does help, and we're always looking to make enhancements to the site itself. So be on the lookout if you're not on our newsletter, monthly newsletter. That's it. It's monthly, but we also have occasional reminders about upcoming events or milestones. For example, actually this month we're projected to hit 10,000 volunteers. So it's a pretty big milestone, and we're close to 350,000 pages transcribed across multiple projects from at least 14 to 15 different Smithsonian galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. So this is a monumental effort that volunteers are doing with the help of all our museum units. And as we approach these 10,000, we do want to remind you, as Joe has said, and Justine as well, with how grateful we are that you're all contributing to the Smithsonian's mission, which was established for the diffusion of knowledge. And these are important records that are being preserved for posterity. So we are all kind of contributing to the preservation of knowledge. But if there are no more questions, let me do one more little scan here.
And one more thing, if I can,
Yeah.
is that also based on what he said there with his help here, and we really appreciate what you're doing, is that we are not staff to transcribe these diaries. We just do not have the manpower to do this type of work. So our volunteers are helping it. They're so invaluable because they're helping us with a portion of the process that we are just not capable of doing. And so something that would have taken us years to do a small collection, transcribe it. Some of these collections, like the Creighton, the Barlow, have already gotten half done in less than a month, which is just phenomenal. I mean, so it would have taken us years to do that if we could do it.
That's right.
So, thank you all.
Yeah, thank you. There are upcoming events. We are in the middle or in the beginning of our Black History Month campaign, the hashtag TC Black History Month. And you can find that on our website. If you go on the homepage, you'll see the carousel on the homepage, and you just click that Black History Month image, and it'll take you to our page where you can see all the projects from the Anacostia Community Museum archives and the National Museum of African American History and Culture. The next week on Wednesday, the 14th, Valentine's Day, we will have a massive transcribe-a-thon for the 200th birthday of Frederick Douglass. And he actually never knew his birthday, so he chose it to be February 14th because his mother, he wrote in his memoirs that his mother used to call him his little Valentine. And it's also kind of an act of radical love to help preserve Black history. And we'll be, this transcribe-a-thon will be all over the country, and we have a couple of locations in Europe as well. So if you go on our website, transcription.si.edu, and go to news page, you'll see our link to Frederick Douglass' birthday and see how you can get involved as well. But Joe and Justine, thank you so much for your insight and for sharing what it means to you to have volunteers contribute.
Yeah, of course. It really means so much. Like, their effort is invaluable. So.
Oh yeah, I can't say enough. Thank you enough to the people who are volunteering, who are doing this hard work. That is another portion of the heavy lifting. We realize this is very meticulous and time consuming, and we appreciate everybody's effort.
Yep. So, well, thank you all. Until next time, happy transcribing. Bye.
Bye.